Did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? Dogman hid in my pickup truck. Dear Scary Stories NYC. If you've ever seen the movie Dogman 1, then you probably are smart enough to check the back of your pickup truck before getting in it and driving off anywhere. Why? Because as it turns out, sometimes dogmen like to take naps in the back of pickup trucks. And I learned this firsthand, as I'm about to tell you. Actually, I usually tend to be a bit on the paranoid and overly cautious side about this very subject. I don't mean I expect to find werewolves in my vehicle, but I do expect to find animals. My father told me he once drove for miles with his neighbor's dog in the back of his truck, and my brother-in-law once discovered a cat in the back of his that he had no idea of the origin of. So to be completely honest, I did and do have this habit that may be a bit obsessive-compulsive, where I look over the back of the truck before jumping in and driving off. I had in fact seen the movie Dogman 1 before this incident occurred, but I am sorry to admit that I didn't really believe Dogman was a thing until after this happened to me personally. On the night in question, however, I neglected to examine the back of the truck for reasons that I don't really want to get into too much detail about. I had driven over to my wife's mother's house, and we had a long conversation about the prospect of my wife moving back home with me. It didn't go very well, and by the time I left that house that night, I think I felt about as sad as I had ever felt in my entire life. So, no, I didn't inspect the bed of the truck. I did not have the emotional strength to even care if some dog or cat were sleeping back there. This was a moment where I was on the verge of a very dangerous emotional collapse. I was refusing to allow myself to think self-destructive thoughts about self-harm or even worse things. The trouble is, I couldn't think of anything positive at all, so my mind was very nearly a blank. I don't mean that in a good way. I was not in a sort of Zen meditation or clarity. I was sinking down under my normal emotional state into an almost robotic kind of consciousness. If my emotions were too painful to feel, well, then I was just going to go numb. In that zombie form, I sat in my pickup and I turned the key in my old truck's ignition in a zombie way. I stepped on the gas like a zombie. I drove like a zombie. Robotically, I stopped at red lights and hit the gas at the green. Inside, I felt completely empty, knowing I had nothing in my future to look forward to any longer. What was the point of continuing living if my wife wasn't going to come home? If the person who used to care the most about me no longer cared at all, then did I actually have any real value? Would I be missed after I was gone? Had there been a point in my being born? You can see why I stopped myself from thinking. None of those questions can lead to a happy answer. I knew I had to endure this period. I knew I had to persist no matter how painful it was, and even if things never got better. But I really didn't want to. I wanted to feel sorry for myself and cry. I wanted to tell myself it was going to be okay, because there wasn't anyone else in the world anymore who was going to do that for me. It was hard to even breathe. I had to will myself to inhale. It was as though my body's automatic functions were becoming too sad to continue. And that is when I got the worst feeling of deja vu I could ever have. In the rearview mirror, I saw dog ears. 2 dark, triangular-shaped, upright, furry dog ears poking up and coming into view. If you've had deja vu, you might remember how strange it feels when it happens. It's not usually also terrifying, though. It doesn't usually come with absolute terror gripping you in your belly. This time it did for me, though, because I wasn't experiencing deja vu for something that had happened to me in my life. I was experiencing deja vu from a scene in a monster flick. Adrenaline surged through my zombie veins, and neither my mind nor my body knew what I should be doing. At first, I hit the brakes, and the owner of those dog ears banged into my cab from behind. No, I didn't want to stop. I wanted to drive faster, my foot decided, and suddenly I was gaining speed as fast as a truck that old can manage. Wait, is that what I wanted to do? The blood was only starting to come back to my confused and depressed nervous system when, in the rear view mirror, I saw what they never had the budget to show you in Dogman 1, the movie flick I've been referring to. I saw a real Dogman. I saw an upright dog-headed ape creature standing bipedally in the bed of my truck, and I heard the thing barking and growling. It had massive, humanoid but longer arms covered in the same dark fur as the rest of it, and it started banging those arms down on the top of my cab, right over my head. I just screamed over and over like, ah, 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 because I was in a nightmare and it wasn't going away. I wanted to stop screaming, but as soon as I was able to get air in my lungs, they just screamed all over again. This was a kind of a horror that one scream alone was not going to handle. The banging ceased but was replaced with the sound of the creature climbing up on top of my cab. I couldn't see him behind me any longer, and I presumed the monster must have been directly up above me. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I started praying, begging for deliverance from this situation. I knew suddenly that I did not want to die. I knew in that moment that who I was married to, and whether that person still loved me or not, was actually a fairly unimportant thing. Compared to the concepts of life or death, the whims of a fickle woman seemed petty in comparison. And, facing the fact that I had a mythological man-eating predator from hell about a foot over my scalp, I could see my wife for the first time as someone who probably didn't deserve my devotion. It still hurt that I was alone and unloved, but it no longer seemed like a reason to give up on life. Knowing that there was a carnivore out of a nightmare looking for a way to make mincemeat out of me just overhead had changed my life from pointless to sublime. Even driving that pickup on that night with the dogman's growls in my ears was such a remarkable experience. Life suddenly seemed so precious to me. I was fine with facing life alone as long as I was able to continue to live. In the Carlos Castaneda books, Don Juan tells Carlos that death is always chasing us, always over our left shoulder. If we stay aware of that and respectful of death, we will be more fully alive while we can be. Well, I can attest to you that it works just as well when death is riding on the top of your pickup truck. The next thing that happened was something I have never seen in any horror movie, but someone should probably do a scene like this. The dogman leaned forward over the windshield, its hideous demon face hanging upside down and blocking my view of the road. I never saw anything like this face before. I was looking into the glowing eyes of pure evil. I was staring at the face of absolute fear. It was a face like a dog, but also not like a dog. This was pure fear, molded into a creature. And I didn't just scream this time. I soiled myself right then and there. I also did something without thinking that changed the course of events on that night. Or I should say my foot, slammed on the brakes. I know it was not a conscious decision. It was a gut fear reaction from suddenly seeing a face in your windshield, you know? I instinctively was trying to stop before I hit the face, as illogical as that was and is. Once that non-decision had been made, though, a natural course of events sprung into action. The dogman flew forward, off my truck, and onto the highway, tumbling and rolling to regain control of its own momentum. My eyes widened as I saw that I then had a window of time, although limited, to try to drive past that creature and leave it choking on my dust. Taking my foot off the brake, I floored the gas and prayed that I would be able to fly by that Dogman before it was able to get back up on its feet. I had no illusions that the thing would be hurt at all, and I knew it was only being momentarily inconvenienced. So all of my effort and focus and attention in my entire being was pressing down onto that gas pedal and gripping that steering wheel. That was the end of me seeing the creature, either in my mirror or otherwise. I don't know where it somersaulted to, but I think it ended up back in the woods alongside the highway. My heart was beating loudly in my ears, though, and I felt certain that the creature was not done with me yet. Even as I pulled into my driveway that night, my eyes darted around, wondering if the Dogman was hiding somewhere, laying in wait for me. I know that's illogical, but the entire episode seemed very illogical. I ran from the truck inside the house like a kid afraid of ghosts or something. I was completely paranoid and frightened, and all I knew was that I did not want to die. Once I got inside, I found that I had a message on my landline. Hitting the play button, I heard my wife's voice coming on, and I hit the stop button just as quickly. I really no longer cared about what my wife had to say. I had decided to go ahead and agree to the divorce she wanted. Exhausted, I went to bed, and that was the end of the worst night of my life so far. In the morning, and every morning for the next few months, I awoke with the horrible empty feeling that comes with remembering that your wife has left you. Accompanying that sad and heavy feeling, though, was the realization that I was still alive, and that life is, for the most part, a pretty good thing. I also felt a little bit more free each ensuing day, and eventually the sadness and the heaviness moved toward my past, with the hopefulness remaining in my present and future. Although it's something I would never want to relive or experience again, I have to say I was taught a harsh lesson by this. Life is too short to let other people make you sad. Life is too short to let other people tell you that you're no good. Even the saddest life is still life, and still can have great joy in it. And it's utterly bizarre to me that I learned these lessons not from my pastor, not from a great genius mind, and not from a retreat with a spiritual master. I learned these invaluable life lessons because Dogman hid in my pickup truck. Don't go anywhere. We've got a second Dogman story for you coming up in this episode. But first, I'm gonna bust this rhyme. Gather round, people, and I'll bring you the news. Our executive producer is Jonathan Cruz. Whether we're off or whether we're on, we're always grateful to this badass John. Please join me in thanking today's prodigal executive producer, Jonathan Cruz, for making this episode possible. In exchange, we send him links to see our secret uncensored stories that we put out each Sunday night. Stories far too wild to ever tell on this channel. And you can see them too. Just join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com, or do what Jonathan Cruz did and click the join link below this or any of our videos. And now, let's get right into that second Dogman story I promised you. This is a very out of the ordinary one, and I found it really interesting. Please let me know if you agree in the comments. We call this one, Is Dogman a manifestation of living plasma? Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a Dogman story for you that also features strange floating lights in the night sky on and around our property. My family and I have come to feel very strongly that not only are these two phenomena related, but they may in fact be two aspects of the same thing. Before you have me locked away in a loony bin, let me tell you what the three of us have been experiencing. We live in a small house on a large property that my wife inherited from her parents. Let's call her Darla, and let's call my son Dan, even though these are not their real names. The property is in Pennsylvania, although I don't really want to say where. We're a lot closer to Pittsburgh than we are to Philadelphia. I'm willing to reveal that much. My son is 15 now, but he was 13 when the events I'm about to describe took place. My wife and I were cleaning up after our family had eaten dinner on the picnic table out behind our house. It is a solid and well-built, but very old-looking table that was here when we moved in. The legs are set into cement fillings in the ground, and I don't think Batman could budge the thing if he tried. Like I said, it's solid, and it's not going to move even if you drive a car into it. It was starting to get kind of dark, but we didn't want to turn on our outside lights since we were almost done bringing everything back inside and neatening the yard up. We were and are very conscious of not wasting energy. Every dollar saved can go to giving Dan better birthdays and better Christmases. So I was coming from the kitchen back outside to finish cleaning when my wife stopped me and pointed out something very strange. There was a red, glowing orb bouncing around on the top of the trees behind our yard. Instantly, a chill went through me. As curious as my wife felt about this glowing light, that was how frightened I felt from the same thing. Neither of us had ever seen such a thing before, so we stood there watching it and mumbling theories to each other about what it might be. It became clear quickly that neither of us had the vaguest idea of what we were seeing. It was not the reflection of headlights from far off. It was a bright, glowing, bowling ball-sized sphere, and it was flitting around at treetop level, almost as though it possessed intelligence. In fact, I am almost certain it had to have possessed intelligence, if not the human kind. Dan, our son, came over to us and started explaining what we were witnessing. "Oh, that's just one of the night lights," he said. "I used to think they were fireflies, but they're too big, and they never blink off, at least not when they're flying." It turns out our son was already familiar with this thing, and he said there were others like it. One orange, and the other usually blue, although it would sometimes change colors in a sort of a reverse chameleon effect. Whereas a chameleon changes colors to hide itself, this blue orb light, according to my son, would change colors in order to make itself stand out more against any given background. I really didn't feel as comfortable about this thing as my son apparently did, and it frightened me that I had no idea these were a part of his life. It looked to me, and it also felt, like it was dangerous. A dangerous Christmas ornament, but dangerous just the same. I asked Dan to always tell me when he sees these orbs from then on, and to never get close to them under any circumstances. After he grudgingly agreed, I ventured out into the darkened yard alone to get the last things off the picnic table to bring inside. As I did so, my wife called my name. She told me, in a really weird-sounding voice, that I'd better turn around. When I did, I saw the red glowing sphere behind me over by the tree line about 90 or 100 feet away from me. The ball was now about my chest height off the ground. I swallowed hard and grabbed a hold of myself internally. I needed to remain calm. I needed to remain disciplined. I was just going to walk inside with the table settings, and I wasn't going to allow myself to become intimidated by this glowing ball. But then, the glow of the sphere faded, and in the shadows, there now stood a figure of a very tall, man-like individual. Initially, the only thing I could make out about its features were its two very bright glowing red eyes, the same red as the orb had been. Almost immediately, it began walking in a casual fashion toward me. As ambient light illuminated what I was seeing, my knees weakened, and I almost fainted. I was staring at a werewolf, or a dogman, or something of that nature. It was a good 7 feet tall, and largely like a fur-covered man. But this man had the head of a demonic kind of canine creature. It stopped walking and just stood there watching me curiously, with its head tilted to the side the way dogs do. I ran toward the house and I tripped over the leg of the immovable picnic table, crashing to the ground and sending what I was carrying flying all over the lawn. Painfully, I rose to my feet and I limp ran back toward the house. My wife was panicking, screaming incoherently, and I assumed I was being chased by the supernatural beast behind me. When I reached the kitchen door and looked back, however, I discovered that Dogman was exactly where he had been before, still eyeing me curiously. My wife and I were terrified. Our 13-year-old son wasn't. "Those aren't real at all," he told us as he fired a rock in the direction of the beast. Before that rock could make contact, the creature just blipped out of existence. 1 second it was there, and the next, we were looking at the trees behind where it had been. "See?" our son asked nonchalantly. "That was just one of those lights trying to scare you." How did that glowing ball suddenly become a Dogman, and then just as suddenly become nothing at all? Could the lights be plasma? Possibly even living, conscious plasma? Are there true forms closer to the lights we see floating around at night? Or are they dogmen who can become light forms? Are all their manifestations equally representative of their true forms, or are all of them illusions? I remember reading some book by John Keel years ago where he speculated that flying saucers might not be metallic craft, but actually living plasma that appears shiny, metallic, and disc-shaped in some manifestations. Might flying saucers, Dogman, and even Bigfoot be literally the same thing? Another idea I've been having since I started researching this is, what if these entities are imitating or appearing as creatures that actually exist? Some people think that aliens pose as owls. Well, what if it's the living plasma posing as both the aliens and the owls? And what if there are real Dogmen and Bigfoot that the plasma bases their versions on? I ask this because some Dogmen and Bigfoot have eye shine, and other kinds have bright red eyes. What we saw had red eyes, as in some reports from Pennsylvania made popular by researcher Stan Gordon. What if those red-eyed Dogman and Bigfoot are paranormal or extra-dimensional, and the ones with white or yellow eyeshine are real earthly creatures? Although my wife and I have never seen the Dogman again, Dan says it's still around. We do see lights floating above the trees still in the summertime. By now, my wife and I have also seen the blue one. I don't think they're from outer space. I think they're from here on Earth. They could very well be an older species than us, just one we never discovered before. I find myself continuing to ask myself and others the same question. Is Dogman a manifestation of living plasma?
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. You have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.